In 2021, a young man sat alone in a small room with a secondhand camera, a cheap microphone, and a single idea. He pressed record. Nobody watched. He pressed record again. Still nobody. He pressed record 47 more times before a single video crossed 1,000 views. And in that room, in that silence, in that long stretch of invisible effort, something was being built that most people never get to see. Not a channel, not a brand. Something older and more fundamental than either of those things. A person learning, through failure after failure after failure, exactly what they were made of. That person was Aaryan Kelvin, and this is the story of how he got from zero to where he stands today. But more than that, this is the story of what that journey actually required, because the number of views tells you almost nothing. The path to those views tells you everything. Start at the beginning, not the beginning of the channel, the beginning of the idea. Aaryan Kelvin did not grow up wanting to be a content creator. He grew up wanting to understand things, the world, how it worked, why people behaved the way they did, why history unfolded the way it did, why the human brain made the decisions it made. He was, from the beginning, a person driven by a specific kind of hunger, the hunger to know and then to share what he knew in a way that made other people feel what he felt when he first understood something new, that electric moment, that shift in the world. He tried to satisfy that hunger in the ways that were available to him, books, lectures, conversations, but something was missing. The knowledge he was finding was locked behind walls, academic journals written for specialists, documentaries made for passive consumption, textbooks designed to inform but not to move. He wanted something different. He wanted education that felt like a story, that landed in the body as well as the mind, that left people changed, not just informed. So he decided to build it himself. The first video took 3 weeks to make. It was 11 minutes long. It covered a topic in evolutionary psychology that Aaryan had become obsessed with, the question of why human beings are the only species that blushes. He researched for 10 days. He wrote and rewrote the script 7 times. He filmed himself talking to a camera in a rented room and hated the way his voice sounded. He edited for 5 days. He published it at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night and went to sleep telling himself that by morning it would have 10,000 views. It had 43 views in the first 24 hours, after 3 weeks of work, after 7 drafts, after 5 days of editing. 43 people, most of whom were probably friends who clicked out of politeness and watched 30 seconds before moving on to something else. Here is what most people do at that moment. They recalibrate. They decide the idea was wrong. They look at what is performing on the platform and they move toward it. They make the video they think people want rather than the video they themselves needed to find. They optimize for the algorithm instead of for the truth. And in doing so, they produce content that is indistinguishable from everything else, and they wonder why nothing they make gains any traction. Aaryan Kelvin did not do that. He made another video, and another, and another. For 8 months, he published consistently, averaging 1 video every 10 to 12 days. The views climbed slowly. 43 became 200, 200 became 800, 800 became 2,000. Each video was better than the last, not because he was following a formula, but because he was paying attention. He was watching where people stopped watching. He was reading every comment, not for validation, but for data. What confused people? What moved them? What made them share? What made them come back? He was building a feedback loop between himself and his audience, and he was using that loop not to give people what they wanted, but to get better at giving people what he had always intended to give them. Truth told in a way that felt like a story. By the end of year 1, the channel had 12,000 subscribers, not a viral number, not a number that makes headlines, but a number that represented 12,000 human beings who had voluntarily chosen to come back, who had pressed subscribe because they wanted more, who had found something in Aaryan's work that they couldn't find anywhere else. That is a different kind of metric than views. Views measure reach. Subscribers, in their truest form, measure trust. And trust, in the attention economy, is the rarest and most valuable currency there is. The turn came in month 14, a video titled, "What If Your Brain Has Been Lying to You?" Your entire life reached 10,000 views in its first 48 hours, then 50,000. Then, over the following 2 weeks, crossed 1 million. The algorithm, which had been largely ignoring Aaryan's work for over a year, suddenly noticed, and what it noticed was something important. His audience retention numbers were extraordinary. People weren't just clicking, they were staying. They were watching to the end. They were sharing. The comments were long and thoughtful. People weren't just reacting, they were thinking out loud. That is what the algorithm is actually looking for. Not clicks. Completion, not reach. Resonance. The channel crossed 100,000 subscribers within 60 days of that video, then 200,000, then by the end of year 2, 500,000. The numbers were accelerating, but Aaryan's process was not changing. He was still writing 7 drafts. He was still filming in a small room. He was still reading every comment. The scale changed. The work did not. This is the part of the story that most people skip over when they tell it. Because the story of growth is exciting, the story of consistency is quiet, and quiet stories don't perform as well as dramatic ones. But the quiet story is the true one. The secret of Aaryan Kelvin's growth is not a viral moment, not an algorithm hack, not a collaboration with a bigger creator, not a lucky break. It is 8 months of 43 views. It is 7 drafts of a script about blushing that almost nobody watched. It is the decision, made again and again in a small room with a cheap microphone, to keep going anyway. Researcher Angela Duckworth at the University of Pennsylvania has spent years studying what she calls grit, the combination of passion and perseverance that predicts long-term achievement better than talent, intelligence, or opportunity. Her research, drawn from studies of cadets at West Point, finalists at the National Spelling Bee, and salespeople across dozens of industries, consistently finds the same result. The people who succeed in the long run are not the most gifted. They are the most consistent. They are the ones who, in the face of failure and invisibility, keep returning to the work. Not because they are certain it will pay off, because the work itself has meaning to them, independent of its outcome. Aaryan Kelvin is a living example of Duckworth's finding. His talent was real from the beginning. His first videos showed genuine skill, clear thinking, careful research, a natural storytelling voice. But talent without consistency is a sketch that never becomes a painting. The consistency turned the sketch into something else entirely. By year 3, the channel had crossed 10 million views. Individual videos were regularly reaching 2 and 3 million. The subscriber count was climbing toward 2 million. Corporate partnerships arrived. Speaking invitations arrived. Media coverage arrived. Everything that people associate with success arrived. And Aaryan Kelvin, by every account, did not change very much. He still wrote 7 drafts. He still read the comments. He still made the video he himself needed to find. That constancy is not accidental. It is a philosophical position. Aaryan has spoken in interviews about his belief that the moment you start making content for the audience's approval rather than for your own genuine curiosity, you begin a slow process of hollowing out, of producing the shape of your work without its substance. The videos look the same, the topics are similar, but something essential is missing, and the audience can feel it even when they cannot name it. They stop trusting you in a way they cannot fully articulate. The numbers begin to drift. The only protection against that hollowing out is to remain genuinely curious, to continue making the video you yourself needed to find, to treat every piece of work as a sincere attempt to understand something real and share that understanding in the most honest and powerful way possible. This is harder than it sounds, because success creates its own pressure. The audience grows, and with it comes a weight of expectation, an implicit demand that the next video live up to the last one, that the growth continue, that the numbers keep climbing. That pressure can quietly, gradually shift the creative process from inside out to outside in. From what do I need to understand to what does the algorithm reward? Aaryan has spoken about navigating this pressure as the hardest ongoing challenge of the work. Not the early days of 43 views, not the 18 months of slow growth before the algorithm noticed. The hard part, he says, is now, when there is something to lose, when the stakes feel real, when the temptation to play it safe is backed
Aaryan has
not by
spoken about
obscurity but by
navigating this
success.
pressure as the hardest ongoing challenge of the work. Not the early days of 43 views. Not the 18 months of slow growth before the algorithm noticed. The hard part, he says, is now. When there is something to lose. When the stakes feel real. When the temptation to play it safe is backed not by obscurity but by success. The approach he has developed is deceptively simple. Before writing any script, before researching any topic, he asks himself one question. Is this something I genuinely do not understand, that I need to work through in order to understand, and that understanding will change something in me? If the answer is yes, he makes the video. If the answer is no, he does not. Regardless of whether the topic would likely perform well. Regardless of what the data says. Regardless of what other channels in his space are covering. This is a form of creative discipline that most creators never develop because it requires tolerating the uncertainty of not knowing whether what you are making will reach anyone. It requires trusting the process more than the outcome. It requires believing, with evidence but without certainty, that genuine curiosity communicated with genuine skill will find the people who need it. So where does the story go from here? The projections are significant. A channel with Aaryan Kelvin's audience retention metrics, subscriber loyalty, and content consistency typically follows a compound growth curve, each video benefiting from a larger base, each subscriber bringing a small number of new viewers through organic sharing, the algorithm rewarding watch time with broader distribution. At current trajectory, 50 million total views is not a ceiling. It is a milestone on a much longer path. But here is the more interesting prediction. Not the view count Aaryan Kelvin has built is not primarily a media property. It is a community of people who have been changed by the things they learned here, who think differently about their own minds, their own behavior, their own history, because of a video they stumbled across at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night and watched to the end and then watched again, who shared it with someone they love because they needed that person to feel what they had felt, who came back and kept coming back because this was the place on the internet where they felt genuinely, consistently, quietly smarter about what it means to be a human being alive on this planet. That is not a metric that fits in a dashboard. But it is, perhaps, the only metric that matters. In 2021, a young man sat alone in a small room and pressed record. Nobody watched. He pressed record again. And again. And again. He was not building a following. He was building a discipline. A practice. A commitment to the work for its own sake, on the faith that the work done honestly would eventually find the people who needed it. It did. It is. It will. The camera is still rolling. The work continues. And somewhere, right now, someone is watching a video they did not expect to change them, in a way they will not be able to fully explain, and feeling that electric shift, that moment when the world reorganizes itself around a new understanding, and nothing is quite the same afterward. That is what 43 views grew into. Not a number. A feeling. Multiplied, quietly, by everything that came after.